remember praying like, God, I want to do whatever it is that you want me to do, but like, I need you to speak to me. Like, I really want to hear your voice because I want to respond. And like, I was like, please speak audibly. I was like, I want to hear your voice. And so I'd walk around this park, City Park. I'd walk around City Park and I would just pray. After like a 3-hour like walk around the park in prayer, I heard nothing. And I was like, I'm coming tomorrow. And I went the next day and I did the exact same thing, 3 hours walking, praying. And then at the end of the second day, I was like kind of pissed off. I was like, God, I genuinely want to hear your voice. Like, I'm trying to discern what you want me to do. I almost felt ambivalent at that point. I was just like, whatever, like just, I'll do whatever. And then on the third day, I think probably halfway through like that time, it just struck me. And God was like, you choose. Like, my will is like very open. Hey, my name is Russell Rader. I am a church planter, Reunion Church, Union Square. I live in Gramercy with my wife, Katie, and my 2 kids, Rose and Luther, 5 and 2. And this is my Faithly story.
Welcome to Faithly Stories, the podcast that brings you inspiring tales from conversations with church leaders as they navigate the peaks and valleys of their faith journeys through their ministry work and everyday life. Join us as we delve into their challenges, moments of encouragement, and answered prayers. The Faithly Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. Learn more at faithly.co. Get ready to be uplifted and inspired as we unveil the heart of faith through stories from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly Stories podcast.
Tell me how your faith journey started.
Yeah, wow. My faith journey started when I was 12 years old. My mom was single at the time, moved across the street from a megachurch in Phoenix, Arizona. And so she had grown up pretty Baptist. My dad had grown up Catholic. And I don't think I could really like name it at the time, but I was just really searching for a father figure and a mentor. And this, of course, came after a lot of reflection. But we moved across the street from that church, and my mom sort of dragged me over there. I had never been to something like that. It was in this like tent structure. They actually in Phoenix use these, they're called sprung structures. They use them for casinos. And so I told my mom, like, Mom, that's not a church, that's a casino. And she was like, no, I promise it's a church. And so we went over there. There was like hundreds of people in this room. And I was like, yeah, I don't really know what that is or if that's for me. But then afterwards, she saw this sign for like this middle school classroom. And she was just like, you're going. And my mom is not like a forceful person in that way, but she's like, you're going to this class. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'm going. And the first person I met when I walked in would be someone who would mentor me for the next 6 years, who would spend every week with me, sharing his own journey, following Jesus, and was like, he gave his life to me, in that way. And, it was really kind of all downhill after meeting Dustin. And I always tell people, like, for me, I'm the byproduct of like discipleship.
That's cool. How'd you meet Dustin?
Yeah. So like I walked in, and literally, like, Dustin was the first person I met, and he was like, let's hang out. So I remember like early days hanging out with Dustin, just like grabbing a Coke after school or like going to McDonald's. And then he would invite me, eventually to like a Bible study with the guys from church. And the church, that church in particular was very large. Like, I think at that time it was like 3,000 people. But it's crazy because like I was at that mega church, but never really like felt like had like a mega church experience. It was like a one-on-one relationship with person.
Was he just a lay leader, or like how did he get to know you?
No, he was actually on staff as a youth pastor there. He's actually like mind blowing. He's still there. And I don't know how many years ago that was. I was 12. I'm not going to age myself. That was 23 years ago.
Was he doing this to all the other kids, or just kind of like a few, or just you?
No, there was a few of us. And he, like, I don't know, he was pretty young at the time too, had a lot of space in his life. But what it ended up being, which was so cool, was starting my sophomore year, he would take a group of 3 of us. And so like very, Peter and John and James it is. I mean, this is bad for the podcast, but the 3 of us would hang out. So Friday mornings, 6 a.m. at McDonald's. and we really were just spending time in scripture. We're reading C.S. Lewis. He would create challenges for us, which was just crazy. He would, one time I remember we got there and he's like, all right, so it's 6 a.m. We're at McDonald's. He's like, we're going to spend 1 hour here and we're only saying scripture. So we would just come up with passages of scripture that we'd know. He says, if we run out of scripture to talk about, then we're going to sit here in silence. This is crazy. And so this was his discipleship process. It was just coming together, read scripture together, and, share and know each other in our lives.
That's awesome. That sounds like a similar experience I had in youth group. My youth pastor, he was really big into, at the time, I didn't even call it discipleship. It was just like church. But there was one year we went to church literally 6 days a week, because there was just something in the summer, and it was the best boot camp I ever had. One retreat, yeah. It was 5 days, and we literally read through the New Testament. Yep. Half the time I was sleeping because it was on tape, and I was just like, but it was on
tape. How old are you?
Yeah, dude. I'm probably older than you, but just that immersive experience. And then only when I got out, I didn't realize how unique that experience was. So for you, yes. When during that process did you realize, oh, Jesus is for you?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, it was right. My life was so different. I mean, I was 12, 7th grade. I go to this church. Here's somebody who cares about me, who sees me, and I'm like, wow, I think there's something to this. And so in a lot of ways, I tell people, I think for me in my journey and in my childhood, and navigating my parents' divorce, Jesus came into my life at a unique moment of need where I needed someone to care for me deeply right where I was. And within 6 months, I was baptized. A year and a half later, I was like, I think God is calling me to full-time ministry, which what 9th grader knows what full-time ministry looks like. I thought being a youth pastor was going to Walmart and shopping and then hanging out with kids and playing video games. So I'm like, who doesn't been called to that? What I think it was, subtly those little challenges and those unique opportunities to be seen and cared for was that was actually all God's hand at work in my life. Those were all God, in the background working out his will for me.
So for you, Dustin was a prominent male figure, but yeah. Did you have other people? And how did that shape you? And how did that help you understand that word father? Because a lot of times when you have a bad relationship with your father and people say God is your father, it's a negative, visceral reaction.
Yeah. It's so fun to think about the ways that I always felt a lacking in that area and sometimes it was just a disconnect. My dad was so different, and my mom would always say to me, think about your dad and focus on the positive things about your dad. She was very pro dad in that way. And then I felt that kind of emptiness there. And then Paul even says it in 2 Corinthians, he says, you've had 10,000 teachers, but you haven't had many fathers. And I always felt for me as a young man, that's the gap that God consistently used to show me he was faithful. And so it was just Dustin. And then I got to college and, right away I met a guy who was always inviting me over to his house and just inviting me into his family dinners on Sunday nights. My junior and senior year, my preaching professor in my undergrad was a father figure to me, really kind and caring. We ended up, our class was kind of small senior year, our preaching class. And so he would just take us to coffee and we would meet over coffee. That was on Fridays too. And then my first job as a pastor, I came out of college. I was pastoring very young. I was 22. I was pastoring at this church, and my first boss was a father figure to me, still is to this day. So yeah, that sort of weakness for me, as though I felt, was a place where God's strength came into my life for sure.
You being a father now, how does that translate? Do you realize it's harder than you realize, or yeah?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much to say there. Daniel, the first thing I'll say is, at 5:15, I go home. I go home at 5:15 because I want to be home with my kids. I want to be present for them and I want to be available to them. But I think maybe the other thing to say is that it's made me, as a son, it's made me more gracious, towards my own parents for their shortcomings and their failures. And, just try to kind of live in that space a little more free. Done a lot of healing in that area. And so I feel like for my own kids, it's like, I'm going to mess them up in some way. I just want to be able to apologize and ask for forgiveness from them. And so I'm just trying to show up more.
What were some of the steps that helped you heal?
Oh, well, I mean, there was a season, that I could share. Well, one I didn't share about is when I got married 9 years ago. We got married. I'm so excited to be a husband. And then I kind of came to that realization, like, how do I be a husband? Like, what does that really look like? I don't want to like live into, everyone around me's story. Like, how do I do that well in my, my own way? And I realized that like I had it modeled to me from some people, and there were some positive things from my own, father, but really needed to like tune into like what that looks like. What does it mean to be a husband? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to eventually be a father? So, I started reading. I picked up a bunch of books. Book by the guy named John Sauer's Manhood Journey was like a really healing book to me. I was just telling someone about it recently. Richard Rohr's Adam's Return, the 5 crucial steps of becoming a man. Picking up some of these resources were really, really healing to me, but then also like lamenting like what I didn't have and what wasn't modeled to me, and not being okay. Like I felt deficient in those areas because it wasn't modeled to me. And, and then of course, some really intense, therapy, counseling was really good. But so I would say like an intentional season of like learning and leaning in and, telling my wife, like, I don't necessarily know how to do that. Right. Like my wife would tell me like, oh, you're just, this is the feeling you're having. I'm like, I didn't know that yet, honey. Like I didn't catch that. You knew my feeling before I did because I was detached from it. And so letting her sort of, both of us learning, like I can take that in and she can deliver it a little bit differently to me.
That's awesome. It's nice to have a partner who can bounce things off and not
sometimes.
Sometimes all the time. It doesn't feel great in the moment, but so
no, it doesn't. My wife and I was pastoring a church in Kansas City. My wife was living here in New York, but my wife is from Kansas City, and so we were in a wedding together. We're both in the wedding, and my friend who was getting married was like, "You want to meet, your wife at my wedding?" And I was like, "Sure, man. Like, if that's how it's gonna work, sure." And so my now wife was in the wedding. We met there. I knew she was leaving 2 days later back to New York, and so I was like, I gotta get on a date with her tomorrow. And so the day after the wedding, we went on a 7-hour date. Like 2 weeks later, we were dating. I was up here in the city like a couple months later, and the rest is sort of history. But yeah.
Wait, where did you grow up? You grew up in Arizona?
Yep. So I grew up in Arizona. I went to school. I went to a Bible college called Manhattan Christian College in Manhattan, Kansas, of all places. It exists. And then after college, I moved to Kansas City, and I was there for 7 years pastoring a church. And so my wife is from Kansas City.
Was that the first church you were pastoring after college?
Yep. I was there for 7 years. It was a wonderful, it was like a foundational place for me to go and serve. A lot of opportunities. I was a really young pastor. I was single, and it was just a really solid place for me.
What did you end up doing there?
Let's see. My title, ironically enough, I don't really recommend this for a job description. My title was the Everything Else Guy. And so, Daniel, you may know what this is like, actually.
Yeah, you're a gopher. Go for this.
Yeah. Go for that. No, I really was. I served in a youth ministry for a year and a half. I oversaw all of our community groups. I was preaching, and by the time I was leaving, I was preaching twice a month there. And so what it really was a great learning ground for church planting. Is what it was. My boss was like, I think you're a church planter. He was really always very open with me and very thoughtful in that way, looking forward.
When did you go to seminary?
Where did I go to seminary? I went to Fuller Theological Seminary from 2000 to 20, and so 5 years hybrid, mostly online.
Was that right after Bible college? Because I thought there was a gap.
No, there was a gap. So I went to, I graduated from Bible college in 2000. And then after about 5 years in ministry, I was like, I think it would be good for me to get some more theological training. My church tradition I didn't need a lot more, like background and training, but I thought continuing ed would be good for me. And so, I went to Fuller.
No, you did it the right way. I always tell people don't go right after undergrad because you need life experience and like you need church experience.
And for me, I agree. And I also think that like going to Fuller while I was, in ministry for a season and then also like preparing to plant was really good. I mean, I was fleshing out a lot of ideas and thinking about worship expression and social justice issues. And like, there's just so many things you're thinking about simultaneously. And so I was actually like, it was the perfect scenario for me.
So when your pastor was like, hey, you should church plant, did you understand what that is? Because church planting is like startups. People think it's glamorous until you do it. And then you're like, oh, wait, we're always almost dying.
Wow. Okay. Church planting. Yes and no. I mean, I think it was like 2012, 2013. I think church planting in that season was a little more sexy too. We started going to Exponential, the church planting conference. And it was like, if you're an awesome, successful pastor, then you can plant a church, And then 2015, 2016 came around and it was like, I don't think that's the way church planting, works anymore. And so I think I had been around enough of that world, enough of, taking on a campus of our church, closing a campus of our church to really kind of take in what it meant. And I feel as though we were really open in that season to trying to figure out, like discerning what that meant for us. But yeah, I think all in all, the training I was getting at that church was preparing me for whatever was next for us. And that church, I mean, the amazing thing about it was they really held loosely to us. I mean, they were just like, we're open to, God's calling on your life. I'm just like, hey, wild, because I was taking on more and more responsibility at the church too.
Something that recently I've been changing my mind on is even the word church planting. I think it's more proper to nuance it as church birthing, because planting is like you kind of plant it and you kind of walk away, but birthing is like you kind of have to like incubate it a bit and then let it go. And I think that's just a better model of like getting churches built.
Well, especially if you think about, I was just telling this to a friend. I'm at WeWork right now. And so there's like all these tech startups, around us. And, when you think about like tech startup world, a lot of them are like, like we're self-made, like, we built this thing from the ground up and, then they sell it for $100 million or whatever, that's the goal. And I'm like, actually, if I'm honest, we are anything but self-made. Like as a church planter, like I am standing on the shoulders of other people. I'm propped up like by Dustin and, by Brian, my old boss, or by Jordan Rice up at Renaissance, like in Harlem. Like we're the byproduct of their discipleship and their cultivation. And then quite frankly, their financial support and their like coaching. And so I like that. So maybe in your metaphor, all those mentors they're actually just doulas, helping birth this church.
That means servant or slave in Greek.
There you go. Perfect.
I have no idea what he's talking about. So is Reunion Church the church you planted?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so we officially launched in 2020, September of 2020. Prior to that, I was at Renaissance Church, doing church planting residency up in Harlem. Wonderful, wonderful place. I mean, again, like in terms of like coming to New York, dreaming about planting a church, like really submitting to the process. When we moved here, I was like, I'm just going to get a job. I don't know if our church planting journey is like starting a year from now, or it's starting 5 years from now. And so I got a job at Blue Bottle Coffee and I was just a barista, but actually like I was doing like contextualization work. I was, asking questions. I put all these questions in my back pocket so I could ask my coworkers or, customers that would come in. And then we're working at Renaissance, for 18 months, before they sent us out to plant Reunion. But problem was I was like late 2019, early 2020. And so it was, It was an interesting season, to say the least.
So how did you get connected to Renaissance?
Actually, a handful of ways. Our church planting organization for Reunion and Renaissance is the same. It's called the Orchard Group. They've been planting churches in New York since the 1940s, actually. And so that was part of the connection because I knew Jordan and Renaissance through the Orchard Group. But also we had a handful of friends. My wife, from being in college at NYU, had a lot of friends that had started going to church at Renaissance.
So you went from KC to Renaissance to do like a residency kind of church planting?
No, actually, a little maybe stupid on my part is like I came from Kansas City with no job and moved to New York and went to Blue Bottle and then, got connected to Renaissance, and they were really gracious to take us in, a white guy, into a predominantly Black church. So good times.
Sounds stupid. We call that faith.
Yes. And yeah, no, I agree. They even told me when I got there, like, you're wild to bring your pregnant wife, to the city to, plant a church. And I was just like, I think this is what I was really still discerning that calling to church planting, I think, and just trying to do the next faithful step thing as I could.
Yeah, I hear that even when you express like your job at Blue Bottle and taking that as an opportunity just to get to know like non-church people and what's going on. Because I think that should be normal, but the fact that it's not normal, like you're just a Christian, but you're also just a normal person. So you don't gotta like shut it on and off. So I love that.
Well, and if I'm honest, I was learning at Blue Bottle and learning in residency, like contextual ministry, like urban ministry at Renaissance. I was doing just as much at Blue Bottle and figuring out what are the hopes of people in the city, what are the dreams. Someone is grinding on Broadway or has this creative endeavor and wants to do jazz in the city. Whatever that was, they want to create an app and they're working this side gig at the same time. I'm learning what are the questions, what are the people really searching for, and what are the overarching cultural narratives that I have to like tune into as a person and a pastor so I can really care about people. And like, if I'm really listening to people's story and journey and figuring out like, where does God intersect with this person's story? I actually started doing it at Blue Bottle before I did it anywhere. And they would tell me, like they would ask me crazy questions. I'll be like making a latte with a coworker and it'd be like, hey, Russell, am I going to hell? And I'm like, I don't know, pass me the oat milk though, And so it was a really good cultivation of my own expression as a pastor outside of the church context.
If someone asked me that, I'd be like, only if you want to.
That'd be good. I love it.
So looking back, what do you feel like you learned in KC, but you learned differently in Renaissance? Mainly because just like the cities are very different. And I don't think people understand like how different New York is and how different Manhattan is from like the rest of the country.
Manhattan is Mars, man. I mean, this is like, it's in one sense, it's like I took some of the like pastoral, like essential things that I learned along the way, some of like the biblical essential things, I kept a lot of those. And to, my boss in Kansas City, he was so good at like organizational feedback and very like missions minded. So I was able to travel with him to Europe and to Africa. And so like there were some things that translate, but like so many of the other like family-centric cultural narratives are just like, those are not helpful. They were helpful in Kansas City, but they're not helpful here necessarily. Yeah, I would just say like reevaluating the dreams and the desires of people, the work-centric nature of New York, like the willingness to grind and like put yourself out there. But I don't know, like maybe some of like the actual like time and rhythms are different too. Like when I moved here, I was always trying to get people to like, I'd meet someone, I'd be like, let's grab coffee, 6:30. And they're like, yeah, no, like, let's get drinks at like 9. I'm like, I don't go to bed at 9:30. Like, I'm old, Yeah, so I would say like everything is different.
Yeah, no one wakes up early unless you have to, or you're working in the markets.
Yeah, like even me now, like I'm like, my alarm clock is, my 2-year-old, but pretty soon, like if he's gonna sleep in more, I'm gonna be sleeping in too. So
when you planted Reunion, did you take a core team from Renaissance, or how did that work for you?
yeah, they were absolutely wonderful. I mean, Jordan, the pastor there, was always so kind to say, like, hey, if you live downtown, you know somebody downtown, you want to go with Russell, like, go. And that, we had a handful of people, respond to that, which was great. But I think even the relational network that you get from that over time is actually the valuable thing. Our unique tension was, gathering up that core team of people, and then COVID hitting the city. I mean, that was the part that was just devastating, because one of the things that we did in terms of like strategy was like, hey, like, what kind of relational network do we have? Do we have like good momentum? And so December of 2019, we were just like, we're just going to throw a Christmas party, and we're just going to see what kind of network we really have. And so we had 75 people show up to that Christmas party, and we're all going to be a part of the church. But it was an idea of like, how could we come above ground, share the name of our church, and say that we're coming in the fall of next year? And we were like, that was a good thing. It was successful. So we started, gathering people over dinner at our home, January, February, and March. And then, COVID struck, and it was just like, the last gathering we had was like March 15th, 16th, something like that. It was like 18 people in our living room. And we were going around the table sharing, like, what is like a story of like hope, if you have one that you want to share right now, and like maybe a fear that you have around this new thing called the coronavirus. And that was our prompt, for that dinner that night.
So did COVID delay your launch?
Oh yeah, definitely. We shifted to like, online core team meetings. And, in that season, if you're familiar with church planting, it's like, you got to go as wide as possible, figure out the relational network, cast like a wide net to as many people as you can to tell them about what you're doing, and like go meet as many people as possible. And COVID is like, here's the goal of COVID. Don't talk to anybody in person. And so instead of like going wide, it was like, all right, we have to go deep with the people we have. And so there were some positives. And I think for me as a pastor, and in that season, like, I'm motivated, I'm a go-getter, and I feel really stifled. I felt there was a lot of like lament of like big vision and big goals of like, hey, some of those things actually need to die in you. And like some of the like launch large metrics need to actually be tempered so that you can be in a place where you leave the fruit up to God. Fruit matters, but it was a season where it was like, okay, I can actually let go of some of those things and care about the people in front of me. And so there was some rich stuff that came out of that season.
Yeah, I'm being convinced more and more. Fruit is not something we see. Fruit is something we experience. And I think, somewhere along the lines, like God's been really, it's weird because it has a similarity to AI and the neural network and how your brain works. And I feel like he's like literally reconnecting all my understanding of just like the kingdom. And so one thing that's been constantly popping up is like, God does not need us to be great. He's great, right? What he needs are good servants, good sons and daughters. And as long as I'm being good wherever I am, he's going to do the great thing.
Yeah. And the gift of ministry is that we steward that. Like we like just doling out God's grace left and right. And it's like such an honor to be able to do that. So I would sit with our core team in that season. And I wasn't like gushing out like all my mess, but there were times that I would just come more honest, like, hey guys, like, I don't, sure, we should talk about strategies for evangelism, but also I'm having a hard week. And like, I think we need to pray for one another. And so there were times where I was navigating like, hey, we have to like push the goal forward, but like, how do we care about the people that are on the call? And I would mess up, I'll be like, hey, we're going to, talk about, what it looks like to train teams, when we can launch. And it was just like, that's not what we needed to talk about tonight. And so it was, I'm grateful for the season. I know it was, absolutely tragic for so many people, but I was really grateful that it slowed me down. It was healing for me in a lot of ways. And then I was reorienting, how to be a dad in that season too. Having a 2-year-old while you're trying to plant a church over Zoom at home, you're just like, I felt like a failure all the time. And so it's just a lot of Well, the math.
It's a good place to be because it keeps you humble. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully.
God knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So even as you talk about that, like something I'm being trying to self-discipline and keep it as a routine is just this understanding that I can't think too far, that I need to focus on today because something might change tomorrow in my plans. And it goes all to, so it's just like, I have a trajectory. But every single day I'm faithful to today. And then only when I look back, I'm like, oh, I didn't even calculate this, but like just being faithful, God kind of just stacked them.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So when you planted, in your mind, did you have a specific DNA or culture you wanted to cultivate? Like what makes Reunion unique?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of our DNA as a church comes out of that season. If you want to recall the season, it's like, it's not just COVID, but it's social justice issues, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. It's like churches in crisis where pastors are lacking integrity and scandalous surrounding church leaders. And so all of those things sort of shaped who we are as a church now. And so like, I'm going to just go through these, like in our like newcomers class, or our membership class, like one of the questions we get asked is like, Russell, who are you accountable to? And one of the things I had to really think through is like, well, people are asking if they're safe in our church. And so that's like an undertone, like as a pastor, that I'm more and more sensitive to. People are wondering, like, is this like some willy-nilly like cult kind of thing? And helping people see like that we genuinely want to get to the heart of Jesus. And so like we launched our church preaching through the book of Mark, saying, who's the real and raw Jesus? And like just trying to go after that. And I'm sharing stories about how like we want to be a safe place. And then on the social justice issue side of things, it's like our church is about mercy and justice. And so like really trying to let that be a heartbeat of our church and not seeing those things as separate from evangelism, but actually tools for evangelism, that our community is really serious. One, about following Jesus, yes, but two, genuinely seeking the good of our city. And so like those things seep into everything that we do. So that was also so pivotal in that season to really cultivate the heartbeat of our community.
Where's your church located?
Union Square, 13th Street.
And what time's your service?
11 a.m.
So it's only been about 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So like what has been going really well and what has been not going well?
Yeah. What has been going well? What has not been going well? I am blown away at the type of people that come to my church. I am just blown away by how they're like, how do I say this? How rooted in the gospel people are in my community, and that like I get to be a part of that, like their life and their journey and their story, and how capable they are. Of course, we're all wrestling with our own immaturity and learning and growing, but I just look around at our community and I'm like, they're part of our church. I would choose to be friends with them, even if we weren't like in community together. And so I just am always blown away by the type of people that are around our church, the way that they are genuinely trying to love their neighbor, and how they're prayerful for like our church, how they take ownership of what we're doing as a community. What's not going well, I would say in any entrepreneurial endeavor, you don't get to control more, so many things. And so at times I'm like, okay, am I heading in the right direction? And I can, feel sort of insecure as a leader. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I leading in the right way? And I think over time, doing this 2.5 years, I'm like, okay, like I know I'm starting to see some of the blind spots I have as a leader. Like, I'm like, okay, our space is becoming a detriment. Like we need to find a more secure location for us to like worship and to like feel present in, rather than feeling like we have to get kicked out, at 1:00. We rent from a dance studio. And so I know there's some tensions, with that, but nothing, if I'm honest, nothing like I'm internalizing, like I've done this horribly. It's like, hey, I'm trying to steward what I'm, doing well and trying to love the people. If anything, it's just like about adapting to those challenges and pushing forward.
I guess what I was trying to like tease out was like, what are some of the mistakes you made that you would go back and fix? Especially for like future church planters, they're like, you got to learn from the landmines of previous like church planners.
No, you all just have to do it yourself. You have to figure out yourself. One of the things that makes church planting so difficult is I'm a pastor. I am not an entrepreneur. I did not go and get my MBA. I'm not a banker. I don't know finance. I had to learn those things. And so I think some of the mistakes I made is not asking for help in the areas I needed help early on. Now, if I don't know how to do something or don't know how to read something, I'm like, okay, teach me how to do this because I don't know. And early days, I would try to fake it. And that didn't help anyone, especially me. And I think the other thing that I learned outside of that early days was getting the right people on the team that wanted to be like fully into the mission, which is hard because in the beginning of a church plant, you're like, everybody come, be a part of this thing we're doing. And everyone's like, what are we doing though? And so staffing becomes so important early days of church planting. I'm so grateful for the people we had early days. And then, getting people that now are internal people that, work at our church, getting the right people that want to be on the team, becomes really, really increasingly important.
So looking back at everything that you've been through, a lot of people get into things not realizing what it is, and, they have great success, but then it like launches them to other stuff, or they say, like, it varies. So for you.
Yeah. Oh man, for me, like, I mean it genuinely. Like, I'll respond to like what God wants me to do. Like, I'm gonna try and discern that the best. But for me, like, I would love to be at this church forever. Like, that would be like my dream job. And I love what we're doing. I like the challenges, that are before us. I have fear for sure. I have fear and things that hold me back, and times when I'm like, man, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Everybody told me this was going to be hard, but this is still harder than I thought it was going to be. But man, I'm having the most fun of my life. And like, my family is like all in, like my kids are a part of what we do. I can't imagine, planting a church without them and them being a part of it. And so I'm not interested in anything else. This is like the thing I want to do.
So that brings me up to your wife. Like, she was cool marrying a pastor?
You know what? I wish she was here because she loves to tell people about. I think we're visiting the town where I went to college, my undergrad, and we're talking to my preaching professor, Dr. Russ York, and he said, how do you feel about marrying a pastor one day? And she says, I wish she was here to say this because it sounds fake for me to say it. And she said something to the effect of, I always like felt like there was something I was supposed to, like, called to or supposed to do in that way. And so my wife is like, she's in as much as I am into our church and investing into the lives of people, and feels that calling and that burden just as much as I do. And there are certain seasons where she has more energy than I do, towards it. But I mean, we feel really strongly that like together is what we're supposed to do. And she's been in the city for 10 years now. I feel like she's fully contextualized, like, full New Yorker, and she's just loves it. So, and she's a mom and has a job as a teacher. And so her life is very full in that sense.
You sound like a lucky man.
Thank you. I will tell her you said that. I am a very lucky man, and I take her for granted sometimes. So I thank you for the reminder today.
Nah, it's all right. That's how you're married. That's the beauty of covenant. You can take for granted all you want. You just can't leave.
There you go.
What was the hardest decision you ever had to make in your life?
Hardest decision I ever had to make in my life? I feel like the hardest decision I ever had to make was probably when I was graduating from college, and I was really discerning like what to do, but like where to do it. I mean, I had like two decent low paying options in front of me. I was living in Manhattan, Kansas, and it was like my options were to go back home and to like do a year-long residency at my home church in Phoenix, or to move to Kansas City and, take a year-long job there. And really just like, that's so funny that you asked this question, because really what I was doing was I remember walking around this park, and I remember praying like, God, I want to do whatever it is that you want me to do, but like, I need you to speak to me. Like, I really want to hear your voice because I want to respond. And like, I was like, please speak audibly. I was like, I want to hear your voice. And so I'd walk around this park, City Park. I'd walk around City Park and I would just pray. And after like a 3-hour like walk around the park in prayer, I heard nothing. And I was like, I'm coming tomorrow. And I went the next day and I did the exact same thing, 3 hours walking, praying. And then like at the end of the second day, I was like kind of pissed off. I was like, God, I genuinely want to hear your voice. Like, I'm trying to discern what you want me to do. I almost felt ambivalent at that point. I was just like, whatever, like just, I'll do whatever. And then on the third day, I think probably halfway through like that time, it just struck me. And God was like, you choose. Like, my will is like very open for you in that way. And they'll lead to different lives and different paths, but like both are great. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I know what it's like to live in Phoenix. And so I was like, I'm going to try this thing out in Kansas City. So.
No, that's perfect, because that's exactly what I would tell anybody. Like, you don't need to hear his voice. You have his words. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you do, because God will make it all work for his good.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, I think a huge part of that is like the cultivation of our character, right? It's like God actually is really interested in who we're becoming, rather than like making perfect decisions. And that feels actually very freeing. And it feels more to the nature and character of who God is.
Yeah. And also, I think something important in your story is that you kept having an open heart, an open and honest heart. And at the end of the day, that's all he asks.
No, that's great, man. That's great. I hope it was helpful. Let me know, what else is helpful in putting it out and things like that. All right. That sounds good.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. Bye, guys.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to the Faithly Stories podcast. We pray this episode gave you the encouragement you needed to continue on your journey. The Faithly Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. The Faithly digital platform offers innovative and practical tools and resources to enhance connection, foster collaboration, and promote growth within the church and ministry space. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help reach more listeners like you. Stay tuned for more uplifting tales from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly podcast. Stay bold, stay faithful, and never underestimate the power of your own story.